I know it.
What do you actually know about fighting? You want her ending up like you? Holding a mop the rest of her life?
What time?
Friday, 8 o'clock. Everybody's welcome. $30. That's all this needs. 30 seconds and he goes back to his...
And Deron Webb is 44 years old, and the best decision he ever made was learning how to disappear. Not literally. He's still here, and 6 feet 1 inch of quiet in gray coveralls, pushing a mop across the rubber floor of Ironclad Fight Academy at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday night. Still here, just not visible. Not in the way that requires anything of the people around him. He learned this on purpose, and it took about 3 months to get it right, and the gym breathes different when it's empty. No bass from the speakers, no sneakers on rubber, no one calling out reps or checking their reflection or pretending not to check their reflection, just the low hum of the air handler in the ceiling and the creak of a heavy bag settling back to still. The fluorescent light above the supply closet that flickers once every few minutes, always once, never twice. Deron knows the pattern, and he knows it the way he knows everything about Ironclad, quietly, completely, without having been told. And he knows which locker sticks in cold weather. He knows the drain in the men's room runs slow on Tuesdays because someone always leaves a towel too close to the grate. He knows the second mat from the left has a soft spot near the corner, a low place in the subfloor beneath it, and that if you land wrong on it during a round kick, your ankle gets a vote on what happens next. Nobody told him any of this, and he just paid attention, over time. The way a man does when paying attention is the one thing he's still good at, and he'd rather not waste it. He pushes the mop in long, even arcs, left to right, overlapping. The motion so automatic his body does it without consulting his mind, and his mind is somewhere else, or nowhere at all, which is the goal. The overhead lights are half killed after 9. 1 full bank over the main mat, 1 dim row along the side wall, 1 buzzing fluorescent above the supply closet that flickers and keeps flickering, and enough to work by, not enough to feel exposed, which suits him fine. And Ironclad Fight Academy sits in a low brick building in the West End neighborhood of Atlanta, on a block that has been in the process of changing for the last decade without fully committing to whatever it's changing into. And there's a laundromat 2 doors down that has been there longer than anyone can remember, and a coffee place next door that opened 8 months ago and put plants in the window. And the gym itself is not new. The floors are original. The walls have been painted over enough times that the corners are rounded now, soft with accumulated layers. It is not a glamorous place. It is exactly the kind of place Deron needed, and he came to it through a program that Garrett Holt runs out of the back office, a standing arrangement to hire veterans that other employers pass on quietly, without explanation, the way people decline things they don't want to have to justify. And Garrett didn't ask many questions. Deron was grateful for that, and for the work, and for the paycheck that kept the lights on in a small apartment across town, and for the specific quality of being useful without being seen. And the job is this. And clean the place after hours, and maintain the equipment, and fix what can be fixed, and flag what can't. And he is better at it than the job technically requires. He replaced a strip of rubber edging on the mat 3 weeks before it would have become a hazard. And he retensioned the speed bag swivel in the back room using a wrench from his own truck because the right tool wasn't in the supply closet. And he resoldered a loose connection in the circuit box that controlled the ceiling fan. He's not supposed to touch the circuit box. He touched the circuit box, and the fan has run without stuttering ever since. Nobody knows about any of this, which is fine. That's fine. And invisible is something he chose. And at the far edge of the good light, in a folding chair she dragged from the stack along the back wall, Sadie Webb is asleep. She is 19 years old, and she has her mother's chin, and her mother's way of biting the inside of her cheek when she's deciding something, and lately, her mother's way of watching Deron when she thinks he isn't looking. And she came back from campus this afternoon, first year, and biology major, and school across town, because Tuesday and Thursday evenings she trains here before her father's shift ends, and on those nights she stays, and he drives her home after. and the arrangement was never written down anywhere. Garrett made it possible without making it a thing. Duran paid for the first month of training himself. Garrett quietly absorbed the months after. Neither of them has said the word free. Neither of them will. And right now, Sadie is asleep in the folding chair with a textbook open on her knees and a highlighter uncapped in her hand and a small sound coming from her that is maybe breathing and maybe something she would be deeply offended to know anyone heard. And Duran finishes the far section of the floor and moves to the windows. He looks out at the parking lot. Empty now except for his truck and the yellow light on its pole and an old receipt stuck to the asphalt by some previous rain. He looks back at his daughter, the textbook, and the highlighter, the sound. He stands there a moment longer than he needs to. Then he turns back to the windows and finishes the strip. The thing about Sadie is that she's a good kid in the way that isn't simple, and 14 months ago she lost her mother, and 8 weeks after the funeral she went back to school, because she said she couldn't sit in the apartment anymore. And Duran looked at her and understood that completely, and the need to put your body somewhere that requires something of it. And he didn't argue. And she's sharp. She processes things fast and files them carefully. And she is observant in a way that comes from him, and which is the clinical kind, and the examining kind, and the kind that notices before it feels. And she has Carla's chin, though. And right now she has Carla's highlighter, uncapped, going to dry out on the page. He'll get it wood before he wakes her. He moves to the equipment room, checks the bag chains, and straightens a hook that drifted 2 inches off center sometime in the last week. He does these things without a list because the list lives in his body now, in 14 months of the same route, and his body is more reliable than paper. And the first time he saw Brooke Sinclair, he was carrying a bucket through the hallway between the equipment room and the main floor, and she was mid-demonstration in front of 20-something students. He didn't stop, didn't slow down. But in the second it took him to cross the doorway, he processed, and excellent hip engagement on the kick, and full weight transfer, and control through the follow-through, that a lot of people half that good don't bother with. And he kept walking. He went back to his bucket, and he didn't think about it after. Brooks Sinclair is 33 years old, and she has been teaching at Ironclad for 3 years. And those 3 years, she has done something genuinely rare. She built the evening program from 14 enrolled members to a rotating roster of 60+. People sign up because they see her name on the schedule, and people stay because of what happens when they're in the room with her. She can teach. That's the thing that needs to be said first. And before everything else that is about to become true about her, and this needs to be established and held onto. And she genuinely and honestly can teach. She has a gift for reading bodies in motion, a twitch in the shoulder before a punch, a heel that lifts too early on a round kick, an intake of breath that telegraphs a combination. And she catches these things from 30 feet away and articulates the correction in 1 sentence and makes a brand new student feel the difference before they fully understand it. And when she's in the room knows it. She also has a second talent, one she didn't set out to develop, one she might not fully acknowledge she has. She is very good at making people feel small. Not cruel, exactly. It's more precise than cruelty. And she knows which comment, and delivered in which tone, and in front of which audience, and will find the exact soft place in a person and press on it. And she learned this somewhere she doesn't discuss. And she uses it the way some instructors use a whistle, as a tool, as a way of maintaining order, as a way of staying exactly where she needs to be, which is above whatever might be gaining on her. The evening that changes everything is a Tuesday. The class is full, and 22 students, a good mix. A few who've been coming for months, and a few still figuring out which foot goes where. And Brooke runs them through a combination jab, cross, and rear leg round kick moving down the line, and watching, and correcting, and her eyes doing their fast scan thing. And she has been distracted since the phone call. Not visibly. Nobody in the room would know. Brooke Sinclair doesn't do visibly distracted. She does composed. She does sharp and certain, and exactly in control. But underneath the composed, and something has shifted, and it shifted 40 minutes before class, when Greg from the sponsor's office called, and was pleasant, and as he always is, and said nothing directly, and as he always does. And then by the end of the call, she understood the same thing she'd been understanding for 4 weeks now, but had not yet let herself name. and they are looking at someone else, and someone younger. Someone at the beginning of a career that looks like hers looked at the beginning. She moves down the line, corrects a man's rear hand position, adjusts a woman's stance, and the class doesn't see what's underneath it because she doesn't let them see what's underneath it. She is very good at not letting people see things. She reaches the end of the line, and her path takes her past the corner of the main floor, where Duran is mopping, and she's processed him, before the way you process furniture relevant to the room, not relevant to her. He's here 6 nights a week. He moves through the edges of the space with that quiet, methodical thing he does. She's walked past him dozens of times, but tonight, and something about the way he's standing there, with the mop, in the gray coveralls, while she is out here in the middle of everything she built, fielding calls from people who've decided she's past useful, and she stops. She looks at him. Then she looks the floor he just finished, the clean arc of it, still faintly damp under the lights. She turns to the class, 22 people watching her. She smiles. "Go ahead," she says, and nods at the clean floor. "Walk on it." And that's what he's here for. The class laughs, not meanly, not loudly. She said it with confidence, and they trust her confidence, so they walk across the clean floor without a second thought. And Darren comes back through, mops it again. He doesn't say anything, doesn't speed up, doesn't look at her, and he just takes the floor again, and clean arc, and left to right. And like it's not even worth the energy of a response. And from the folding chair along the wall, Sadie lowers her textbook. She looks at her father, then at Brooke, then back at her father. She doesn't say anything either, but she files it. That should have been the end of it. And a small cruelty from a woman under pressure. The kind of thing that happens in rooms where power is uneven and nobody calls it by its name. It should have evaporated. It doesn't. 2 nights later, Thursday, Brooke forgets her phone, and she's already in her car, already pulling out of the lot when she realizes. She doubles back. Comes in through the side door. Front is locked. Duran has the keys. She knows the side code. Moves through the hallway toward the back office, past the equipment room, and she stops. The main floor. Duran is standing at the near edge of the mat beside Sadie. The gym is empty, just the two of them under the one working bank of overheads. Sadie is in her stance, feet set, hands up, and Duran is not touching her, just standing beside her, talking, and low and even. Whatever he says, Sadie resets, adjusts her hip, throws across. Brooke hears it from the hallway, the snap of it, and the specific crack of a punch that landed in exactly the right relationship to the body throwing it. Sace looks at her own fist like it surprised her. Then she laughs, bright and delighted and real, and Darren, and barely visible from where Brooke stands, and makes a sound she would not have predicted from him, a laugh, and short and rusty, and like a hinge that doesn't get used much, and the two of them, in the half-dark of an empty gym, grinning at a punch. And Brooke stands in the hallway. She doesn't move. What she's seeing is not what she prepared herself to see when she imagined this man. The quiet and the stillness she'd read as absence, as emptiness, and what's actually there is level and precision, and a specific kind of understanding in how he positioned himself beside his daughter, and what he said, and what the result was. And this is not a man who learned technique from a YouTube video. Something moves behind her eyes. She gets her phone, and she leaves. She doesn't say anything to either of them. She tells herself she doesn't think about it on the way home. She thinks about it on the way home. The Friday class is the biggest of the week. 28 students, and Brooke at the front, running a padwork series, moving the line through combinations. Duran arrives at the start of his shift and begins the back section near the storage room, the way he always does. Sadie is at the far wall, and folding chair. Textbook again. This time she's actually reading. Brooke reaches the middle of the line and she pauses. She looks at Sadie, just for a moment, then she's crosses to where Sadie is sitting. "Come on up," Brooke says. The voice of an instructor calling a student forward. And easy, warm, even. Except Sadie is not enrolled in this class, and the warmth has an edge to it that Sadie feels before she can name it. She's 19, and she's been paying attention in rooms with adults her whole life, and she knows the temperature of things. But there are 28 people watching. She closes her textbook, stands, walks to the center of the mat on legs that have decided to stop cooperating fully. "Show everyone what your dad's been teaching you." 28 heads turn. Sadie's face goes neutral, and her ears go slightly pink. She sets her feet. She knows the technique. knows it in her body now, in a way she didn't 3 weeks ago, because her father stood beside her in an empty gym and said 3 things in a row, and her body understood what her mind was still catching up to, and the knowledge is there. But this is 28 people, and Brooke is standing 3 feet away wearing that expression. The one that looks like encouragement, the one that has an entirely different function. Sadie throws the cross, and every piece of the correction deserts her, and weight back, arm punch, elbow drops before extension. The cross comes out short and soft and unconvincing, and she knows it the instant it leaves her hand. The class laughs, light, reflexive, the sound a room makes when someone stumbles in public, and nobody in that room thinks they're being cruel. They are 28 people responding to an awkward moment, and that is all they think it is. Brooke lets it settle for a moment. Then she turns to the back of the room and to the man standing completely still with a mop in his hands. What do you actually know about fighting? Her voice carries. She designed it to carry. You want her ending up like you? Holding a mop the rest of her life? And the room goes quieter than it was during the laughter. A different kind of quiet. The kind that comes when something real just entered the air. Duran doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't raise anything, and he looks at Brooke the way a man watches weather come in, reading it, not afraid of it, just figuring the distance. He sets the mop against the wall. He crosses the floor, not fast, not slow, and the way he moves through the whole building like he's been here before, and he'll be here after, and whatever happens in the middle doesn't change the geography. And he stops a few feet from center. He says one thing, low, controlled. The front row actually leans in slightly to chit. What time? Not a question. Brooke blinks, and the fraction of a second where something moves behind her eyes. Maybe the part of her that has spent 15 years reading opponents, that reads him right now and doesn't like what it's finding. That says stop, and that knows there is something in this man that she did not account for when she picked him. But she has an audience. She has 28 people and at least 3 phones already up. She lets the instinct go. And Friday, she says, and louder now, and shapesing it for the room. And 8 o'clock. Everybody's welcome. The room exhales. Someone whoops. Near the door, a phone is already framing Sashat. Duran picks the mop back up. He finishes the strip of floor by the storage room. He doesn't look at the crowd. He doesn't look at Sadie. But from across the room, in her folding chair with the textbook closed on her lap, Sadie is looking at him. And the expression on her face is not one he has a name for yet, but that he will recognize later as the expression of someone who has just understood that the ground is not as solid as they thought. The clip goes up at 11:43 that night, and 4 words in the caption, one punch. Dare you. By midnight, it has 4,000 views. By 2 in the morning, 17,000. And Brooke posts it, goes to sleep, and wakes to a phone that won't stop, and a number on that video that has crossed 150,000 and is still climbing. And Duran doesn't see any of this. He is asleep. The next morning, Garrett Holt calls him into the back office. Garrett is 57 years old, and he has the kind of face that accumulates experience visibly, not in lines exactly, but in the set of the jaw, the way the eyes move, the weight he carries in his shoulders that hasn't always been there. He was a fighter a long time ago, and he built this place with money he earned, with his hands and his body, and some years he doesn't talk about much. He knows the difference between a man who trains and a man who has been used for something. He knows what Duran is. He knows because he read the file. And the real one, the one from channels most gym owners don't have access to, the one that said things about an Army Ranger from Atlanta who served 3 deployments and came home with skills that the Army had not spent any corresponding time teaching him how to stop using. And he read it before he offered the job. And he offered the job anyway. Now he stands behind his desk with both hands flat on it, and the look of a man presiding over a situation he didn't build and can't fully contain. On the desk, a printout of the video, the view count, the comment count. And you know I can't let her fight you, Garrett says. Duran stands just inside the door, hasn't sat, doesn't feel like sitting, and I can't let her go. Garrett's voice stays even, and she's running 60% of our membership. I lose her. Half those people follow her out, and there's no gym left to clean. I know, Duran says. So here's where we are. Garrett straightens up. This costs him something visible. And you walk away from this, you're a coward on 30 phones, and your daughter watches it happen. Or you step on that mat, and I have to let you go. A janitor fighting an instructor on video. Gym logo in the background. I don't survive the insurance exposure. And he lets that land. And if you're gone, Sadie Spot goes with you. Her belt test is in 3 weeks. Duran says nothing. Because none of that is wrong. Not a syllable. Garrett comes around the desk. Lowers his voice. Read your full file, Duran. Everything in it. A pause. And that's exactly why I'm asking you not to. Not because I think you'll lose. That night, after the last student leaves and the lot empties, and Garrett locks the front and leaves Duran with the keys, Duran stays, and he finishes the route. Mats, mirrors, locker room, windows, and then he doesn't leave. And he stands in the middle of the main floor, with the lights down and his hands at his sides, and the air handler humming and the bag settling and the supply closet light doing what it always does, one flicker, just one, and he doesn't move for a while. His hands start doing something. He walks to the equipment drawer. He takes out the roll of athletic tape, and white 1 inch, and his hands wrap, and the loop across the palm, and the anchor between the middle and ring fingers, and the pull across the back of the hand, and around the thumb base, and the second layer over the knuckles, and the tier, the press. He didn't decide to do this. His body decided. He looks at his wrapped hands, 15 years since the last time, not one motion wrong. And the thing is, and here is the thing that lives in the box, the one he keeps far back and doesn't take out casually, it isn't the deployments. And people assume. They see the scars, they hear Army Ranger, they construct a story about foreign places and firefights and things seen and done under a different sky. That's not the box he carries. And the deployments belong to a different container. One he's had long enough to know its exact dimensions and weight and how far he can walk with it before he needs to set it down. The box he carries is from a parking lot in East Atlanta, and 6 months after he came home, a Saturday afternoon. Carla at the car, him getting the cart, a man walking up beside her, saying something, putting his hand on her arm. Duran does not remember moving. He remembers after. The man on the ground, his own knuckles split, and a sound coming from his own throat that he didn't recognize, not anger, not anything with a name he knew. Something older than all of that. Something the Army found in him and sharpened and used and had not spent a single hour teaching him how to put away. And then Carla's voice. His name in her voice again and again. He looked up. She was at the car, not running, not screaming, not calling for help. Standing with her hand pressed flat against the window glass, looking at him, not horror on her face. Something more complicated, and the expression of a woman who loved him and had just met a part of him she didn't know was there, and recognized it. She drove home, she handled the aftermath, and she kept it quiet in the way that only Carla could keep things quiet with grace and without making him feel diminished by her grace. But that night, in bed, in the dark, and she'd been facing away and he thought she was asleep, and then she said, and very quietly, and into the darkness. And we need to figure out what we do about that. And not you. We. That was Carla. That was exactly Carla. He spent the years after trying to be worth it, we. And then she got sick. And the figuring out became other things, the appointments, and the waiting rooms, and the slow narrowing of a world down to its most essential contents, her, him, Sadie, and the time they had left with each other. And the last promise came in February. Low light, the smell of the ward at night, and her hand, light by then, and so light, and reaching across the blanket for his, and folding his fingers inside hers, because she wanted to feel them closed, even when she couldn't close them herself. And she only has you now. Her voice almost nothing. Whatever you brought home with you, whatever's still in there, don't ever let her be afraid of you. Not once. Not ever. Promise me that. He promised. 14 months. He has not once let his hand become a fist. And he stands in the empty gym and looks at his wrapped hands. Then he unwraps them. Slow. Careful. Loop by loop, the way they went on. He drops the tape in the trash by the water fountain. And he goes and sits on the edge of the mat in the dark. And he is still for a long time. He doesn't think about the fight. He thinks about the promise, which is the same thing from a different angle. Sadie comes for the weekend, and she drops her bag inside the door and finds him in the kitchen, dish towel in his hands. She's been fielding texts from people at school since Thursday night, people she's never spoken to, people who suddenly want to know things. And for the first time since her mother died, she is not the girl people feel sorry for. She is the girl with the father who said what time to a black belt on video. She stands in the middle of the living room, and she says everyone at school has seen it. He folds the towel, waits. Aunt Marcus from my study group says his whole family's coming Friday. She shifts her weight. The thing he can see building in her is something new, something he doesn't have a name for yet. And are you actually going to fight her? He sets the towel down. He looks at his daughter, the chin, the way she bites the inside of her cheek right now, deciding something. Exactly, her mother, exactly. He tells her a piece of the truth, not the whole thing, and the piece she's ready for. A long time ago, he says, carefully, like placing something on a shelf he's not sure will hold it, before you'd really remember. I hurt someone badly, and in a parking lot, he watches her face change. I don't remember doing it. I only remember after. She is very still. Something happens in me sometimes. He says it plainly. The way he says things that are just facts. Something I don't get to decide. And once it starts, I don't know where it stops. She has never heard him say anything like this. He can see her processing it, the filing thing she does, and taking it in and putting it somewhere careful. And then she says, and so simply, and so practically, and like the solution is obvious, and she is slightly surprised he hasn't arrived at it already. And then don't fight her. And you don't have to hit her, a beat. Just stand there. She'll get tired before you do. You can do that, right? He looks at his daughter. Something in his chest eases and tightens at exactly the same moment. Yeah, he says. That's a lot. And then do that. She goes to get a glass of water. The conversation is over, apparently. For her, it's resolved. She handed him the solution, and she expects him to use it, and she's moved on. He stands in the kitchen for a moment after she's gone. He thinks she is 19 years old, and he thinks she is exactly her mother. He folds the dish towel and hangs it on the oven handle and goes to the window. And outside the street is quiet. One car passing, a dog somewhere. The particular silence of an Atlanta night in late October when the heat has finally released its grip and the air comes in cool through the cracked window above the sink. On the shelf by the television, a photograph and a woman mid-law. Face tilted up, whatever she was laughing at gone now, just the laugh itself, permanent. He looks at it for a while, he has a promise, and he has a daughter who handed him the precise and practical shape of how to keep it. He goes to bed, he does not sleep, but he goes to bed. Friday. The parking lot fills before 7:30. Cars he's never seen, faces he doesn't recognize, and people who drove here with the specific energy of someone who saw something online and needed to be present for whatever came next. Two women in workout gear who clearly don't belong to this gym, and a man holding a phone that costs more than Duran's rent, already recording the door. Duran arrives at 6:50, his normal time. He feels the room notice him the moment he crosses the threshold. Not loudly, not with sound, a shift, and 30 heads that were angled one direction quietly adjusting to include him. He picks up his cart. He starts the back section the way he always starts, near the storage room, the way he always begins. Garrett catches him before he gets far, and they don't go to the office. Garrett just stops beside him, looks at the floor. Waivers on the desk. You both sign before anything happens. He pauses. Duran looks up. Whatever you decide tonight. Garrett holds his eyes a moment. Your position here doesn't change after, and Duran nods once. He goes back to work. By 8, the room cannot hold everyone who wants in. 3 deep along the walls. Someone on the bench by the window, standing, and nobody asks them to get down. And the heavy bags pushed to the edges without being asked. The center of the floor cleared the way. Floors always clear before something is about to happen, not because anyone organized it, but because crowds understand space, understand that some things need room. And Garrett stands at the edge with a clipboard and the expression of a man hosting a natural disaster. Both of them sign the waiver in front of him. He doesn't look at either one while they do, and Sadie is at the front of the crowd. He told her to stay home. She said no. He ran out of time to argue and out of heart to force it. She stands with her arms crossed and her expression closed, and she is watching him across the cleared floor. Brooke steps to the center, and she's been in her gear since 7:30. She works the room the way she knows how: easy movement, loose shoulders, eye contact with familiar faces, and she knows when the energy crests. She feels it like pressure in her sternum. She lifts her chin toward the man at the far edge. 30 seconds, she says. Loud enough for the back wall. That's all this needs. 30 seconds, and he goes back to his mop. And Duran sets the mop against the wall. He reaches up, unzips the gray coveralls to the waist, pulls his arms free of the sleeves, lets the top hang, and the room stops. and the body underneath the gray work shirt is not the body anyone prepared for. Not a gym body, not a trained for, this body in the way people mean when they say that. Along the right flank, the long puckered seam of something that took its time leaving, and across the ribs, a clean white line blade, not surgery, and high on the shoulder, low on the hip, 2 round marks, one larger, one smaller, the smaller where something entered, the larger where it didn't stay, and the kind of marks that anyone who has watched the news for any length of time can identify on sight. His body was not built in a gym. His body was used hard for something else entirely. The room goes silent with a completeness that Brooke has heard maybe twice in her career, and not quiet, silent. The kind that happens when 50 people draw breath at the same moment and forget to let it go. She looks at him, and in every instinct she has ever trusted, every piece of opponent reading she has spent 15 years developing, every alarm bell, every pre-fight sensor that she depends on to stay ahead of what's coming. Every single one says stop and get out. Find a door that isn't locked. Laugh it off. Let this be the night you turned around. She is the only person in the building who won't let herself listen to it. She finds her stance. She lifts her hands. She starts. And then the man with the mop stands in the cleared center of the floor with his hands at his sides. And he waits. Like he has time. Like he has all the time there is. Like whatever comes next is something he has already accounted for. And not afraid. Not performing, not afraid. Just. Still, Brooke Sinclair started losing long before Friday night. She just didn't know what losing looked like yet, hadn't recognized it in the shape it was taking. Because losing, when it comes for you quietly, doesn't announce itself, and it doesn't arrive with noise or spectacle. It shows up wearing the face of a phone call, a politely worded message, a sponsor rep who says all the right things in exactly the wrong tone. She finds out what losing looks like on a Wednesday morning, and alone in the back office. Laptop open, room dark except for the screen. On the screen, herself 3 fights. The last 3 she competed in before she stepped away from the circuit. And before she told everyone, she stepped away because she wanted to focus on coaching, because her students needed her, because this was the natural evolution of a serious career. She watches herself get caught by a jab she should have seen, and she watches her legs stop being fast enough in round 3. And she watches herself get separated by a referee from a woman who is 26 years old, and therefore 5 years ahead of where Brooke is now in a direction that cannot be reversed. She has watched this footage more times than she will ever say out loud, and more than she admitted to herself, even. The number crossed into something else around month 4 of being off the circuit. She told herself she was studying, analyzing, correcting. She wasn't. She was looking at the frame where it turned. And where everything before was still possible and everything after wasn't, her phone lights up. She knows the number before she reads it. The sponsor rep. His name is Greg. Greg is pleasant, and Greg has never once said a direct negative thing to her in 4 years of calls, which is either professionalism or cowardice, and she stopped caring which a long time ago. We're heading in a slightly different direction for the next cycle, Greg says, and we have so much respect for everything you've built. And will absolutely stay connected. She says the right things back. She hangs up, looks at the phone, then at the laptop. Not the fight tapes this time, the other video, and the one that went up 6 days ago and now has more views than anything she has ever posted about any fight she has ever won. A man in gray coveralls, her voice over it, 1 punch. Dare you. She closes the laptop, sits in the dark for a while, and... Here is the part she doesn't say out loud. This clip is the only thing keeping her name alive right now. This challenge. This man who said 2 words and turned it into the most watched moment she's ever been part of. She hates that she knows this. And she hates it the way you hate the one thing keeping you afloat when you would have preferred to swim. She doesn't open the laptop again. And she goes and teaches the morning class, and she is technically excellent and fully present, and not one person in that room would know that anything is wrong, and she is very good at that. She does not expect Coach Aldred. He doesn't call ahead, doesn't text, and he appears on Thursday at noon, her private training hour, the 60 minutes she keeps off the schedule because they belong to her, and he's sitting on the bench along the far wall when she comes out of the locker room. He's 62 years old. Retired 3 years now, and he looks smaller than she remembered. Or maybe she just got used to how large he seemed when she was 21, and he ran everything, and his opinion was the only one that mattered to her in any room. And she stops. "You could have called," she says. "I watched the video," he says. She crosses to the mat, starts wrapping her hands. Something to do with them. Which one? Both. He folds his hands in his lap, unhurried. "Your clip." And the longer one someone else posted. And the one where the room goes quiet when he takes his shirt off. She keeps wrapping. "He's not just a janitor," Aldred says. "I know that now. You knew it before." And he says it without heat, just observationally. The way he always delivered things she didn't want to receive, like they were simply facts, and the only option was to take them in and figure out what to do next. You saw something in that man that unsettled you, and instead of looking at what it was, you used your position to make him into something the room could laugh at, before he got the chance to make you into something worth examining. And she stops rapping. "It wasn't that deliberate," she says. "The worst things rarely are." She looks at her half-wrapped hands, the tape crooked now, the loop she lost track of while she was talking. "What do you want me to say?" she asks. Aldred stands, and he came to say one thing, and he said it, and now he's leaving. That was always how he was. She used to find it maddening. Now she just recognizes it. "You're going to step on that mat tomorrow night," he says, pulling on his jacket. "And I'm not here to stop you." He pauses at the door. "But Brooke, when it's over, however it goes, you need to figure out what you're actually afraid of, because it isn't him." He leaves. She stands in the middle of the empty gym, her hands half-wrapped, and his question sitting in the room with her. "What are you actually afraid of?" She doesn't answer it. She rewraps her hands, and she trains for an hour, and she is precise and focused, and she does not answer it. But the question stays. Patrice Odom is 39 years old, and she has been a member of Ironclad for 2 years. She has walked past Deron Webb in those 2 years somewhere around 200 times. She counted later, approximately, and that is what she arrived at. And hallway, parking lot, and main floor, and equipment room. And twice she held the door, and he nodded without looking up. Once she said, "Excuse me," because he was near the water fountain, and she needed it, and he moved, and she didn't register his face. And 200 times. And on Thursday afternoon, she arrives early to pick up her nephew from the strength class. He's 22, and been training here 8 months, and has finally started listening when she tells him to stretch after, and she comes in through the side entrance, and there is a man crouched at the far end of the locker hall in front of the third locker from the left, and doing something to it with a small tool she doesn't recognize. And she watches for a moment. He looks up, not startled, registering. Lock's been sticking. Since about 3 weeks ago. She frowns. "Nobody reported it?" "No." "How did you know it needed fixing?" A small pause. "I noticed." She looks at him. Really look. And for the first time across 2 years and 200 encounters, she actually stops and looks at this man. The gray coveralls. The careful way he holds the tool, not gripping it, just placing it exactly where it needs to be. And the way he answered her without performing patience or performing helpfulness. He just answered. "I fixed a lock nobody reported because he noticed it was broken." "You're here every night?" she asks. 6 nights. "I've walked past you so many times," she says. And then, because she is Patrice, and Patrice says the thing, "I never actually looked." "I'm sorry about that." He is quiet a moment. "Thank you," he says. She nods, goes to find her nephew, and later she will think about the way he said it. Not as a dismissal, not as the thing people say to end an awkward moment. He said it like he meant it, like it was the correct response to something real she had done, and, like being seen, was not something that had happened to him recently, and he wanted to acknowledge it honestly. She thinks about it on the drive home. She doesn't forget it. Thursday evening, the apartment. Sadie is back on campus, and Deron makes dinner, real dinner, not whatever requires the least thought. He eats at the table, and the apartment is quiet in the specific way it gets when it has been 2 people and becomes one again, when the sound of another person's existence disappears and the walls register the absence. He's learned to live in this quiet, has been learning it for 14 months, and tonight the quiet has a different shape. He finishes the dishes, wipes the counter, folds the dish towel the way he always folds it thirds, then thirds again, and hangs it on the oven handle. And then he stands in the kitchen. Then his feet take him somewhere. The hall closet. Top shelf, behind the spare blanket and a flashlight that needs batteries and a box of Carla's things he is not ready to move. The athletic tape. He reaches for it. He stops, and his hand 6 inches away. He knows what will happen if he picks it up. He knows because it happened 4 nights ago in the empty gym, and he stood in the dark, with his hands wrapped and his body remembering every loop and anchor like 15 years was nothing, like the time in between parenthesis. His hands chose not to read, and he leaves the tape on the shelf, closes the closet door, goes and sits on the couch in the dark. This is the thing he doesn't take out often, and the thing that lives in the box he carries, the one that isn't about the deployments, the one that belongs to geography, entirely a strip mall parking lot in East Atlanta on a Saturday afternoon 6 months after he came home. Carla was at the car, and he was getting the cart, and a man walked up beside her, said something, put his hand on her arm. Deron doesn't remember moving, he remembers after. The man on the ground, his own knuckles split. A sound coming from somewhere in himself that had no name in any language he knew, not anger, not fear, and something older. Something the army found in him and honed and used and never once explained how to turn off when the work was done. Then Carla's hand on his shoulder, and his name in her voice. He looked up. She was not running, not calling for help. Standing with her hand pressed flat to the window glass, looking at him with an expression he had never seen from her before and spent the rest of their marriage trying to replace. Not horror, and something that went deeper than horror. Recognition, the particular recognition of someone who loved you and had just met a part of you they didn't know existed. She drove home, and she handled it. She kept it quiet with the grace that was entirely hers, and she never made him feel smaller for needing her grace. But that night in bed, and in the dark, and she'd been facing away, and he thought she was asleep. And then she said, very quietly, "We need to figure out what we do about that. Not you, we." He sat with that for a long time. He spent the years after trying to deserve it. And then she got sick, and the figuring out became the appointments and the waiting rooms, and the slow narrowing of a world down to what mattered most, and which turned out to be her and him and Sadie and the time they had left with each other. Which was not enough time. It was never going to be enough time. He sits on the couch in the dark until his breathing settles, until the box closes back up, until the apartment is just an apartment again, and the quiet has returned to its normal shape. Then he goes to bed. He doesn't sleep right away. But the not sleeping is calm, and it isn't fighting anything. That's something. Friday morning Sadie calls, not about the fight. And she calls to ask about a section of her biology reading she can't make sense of, and they talk about cell membrane function for 11 minutes, and at the end she says, "I'll be there at 7:30. And he starts to say her name, and she says, "Don't argue," and hangs up, and he holds the phone, then he sets it down, then he does what he told her he'd do, and he gets ready for work. Troy Beaumont finds him in the parking lot at 5:45. Troy is 29. And he's been at Ironclad 3 years started because he wanted to get in shape, and stayed because it turned out he was good at it, and genuinely good, and the kind of good that surprised him and kept surprising him. And he's Brooke's most advanced student, and not her favorite, maybe, but the one she demonstrates on, and the one she reaches for when she needs someone who won't embarrass the technique. And he's a big man, not as big as Deron, but big. He crosses the lot with his hands in his jacket pockets and stops about 4 feet away. "You don't know who I am," Troy says. "Third from the left," Deron says. "Tuesday, Thursday classes, usually." Troy blinks. "Okay, I pay attention." And Troy looks at the ground between them, then up. "Coach Brooke is the best instructor I've ever trained under," he says it first, deliberately, like he needs it on record. "And I mean that. She changed how I move. Changed how I think about moving. That's real, and I'm not walking it back." He is still what she did with your daughter. Pulling her out like that, in front of everybody, setting her up to fail. A pause, that was wrong, flat out. And I've been in that gym 3 years, and I've never once said a thing to her she didn't want to hear. He meets Deron's eyes, and so I'm saying it to you instead. Not every person in that room was comfortable with what happened. Deron looks at him. "I'm not asking you to do anything with that," Troy says. "I just wanted you to know." He stands there a moment. Then he turns and walks back toward the building, and Din watches him go. This cost Troy something. The walking across the lot, the saying of it, the willingness to hold the thing he actually thought in both hands and offer it to a stranger. And it cost him, and he gave it anyway. Duran files it. He goes to work. 6 o'clock. 7. By 7:15 people Duran has never seen are in the building, not members. People who drove here because of a video on a phone. 3 of them ask the girl at the front desk what time, and she's filling in tonight, young. And she confirms 8 o'clock with the enthusiasm of someone who just realized they're part of something. Duran cleans the locker room, and he cleans the equipment room. He moves through the building on his route, and the building moves around him differently tonight. A changed temperature. The particular quality of air in a room before something happens that cannot be undone. He has felt this before, and he knows what it means. He keeps moving. At 7:45, Garrett finds him and holds out a single sheet of paper. Waiver, Garrett says. Read it, sign it, we're covered. Or you don't, and we find another way through. And a pause. Still your call. Duran reads it, signs it, hands it back. Garrett looks at the signature, folds the paper, puts it in his shirt pocket and goes to find Brooke without another word. 8 o'clock. 3 people deep along every wall, and someone standing on the bench by the window and nobody asking them to get down. Near the back exit, 2 phones are already streaming. The heavy bags at the walls, the center of the floor empty and waiting, and Garrett at the edge of the mat, clipboard in hand, face like a man attending a funeral he was forced to organize. Brooke steps to the center. She's been in her gear since 7:30, and she stood in the locker room before she came out and looked at herself in the mirror for a long time. Not vanity, the opposite. The kind of looking you do when you're taking inventory of what's actually there behind everything you project. She didn't love what she found, and she came out anyway. She's always been good at coming out anyway. She works the room the way she knows how, easy movement, loose in the shoulders, eye contact with faces she recognizes, and she knows when the energy peaks, and she lifts her chin toward the man at the far edge of the cleared floor. 30 seconds, she says, for the room, for the phones, for the performance she has committed to. That's all this needs. 30 seconds. Then he goes back to his mop, and Darren unzips the gray coveralls, pulls his arms free, lets the top hang. The room goes silent. The silence that happens when 50 people draw breath at the same moment. And Brooke has heard this exact silence maybe twice in her career, and both times it meant something she wasn't fully prepared for. She looks at the scars, the seam along his flank, the white line across his ribs, and the 2 marks shoulder and hip that she knows, that anyone who has paid attention to the news knows, without needing them explained. And this man was not made in a gym. Something says stop. The same voice that said it earlier in the week, that has been saying it since Thursday night when she stood in the hallway and watched him make his daughter's punch into something else entirely. Stop. And she is the only person in the building who will not listen. She finds her stance. She starts. The first 2 minutes are technically beautiful if you're watching from the right angle and the right distance, and you don't yet understand what you're actually looking at. And she comes out with everything she has. Ab cross, landing exactly where she aimed, which is the air beside his left ear, because his head is already an inch off the line before she commits. And lead hook, and loaded cleanly, and shoulder turned through, finds nothing because he has drifted, and not backward but sideways, and just enough, and without appearing to hurry. And round kick to the body, her hip loaded the way she has thrown this technique 10,000 times lands on his forearm, where he's dropped it to cover, and the impact absorbed without drama, like throwing against a wall that learned to move. She resets, watches his eyes. His eyes are the problem. They're not afraid, not calculating, not doing the chess-forward processing she recognizes from real opponents. They are settled, present, and like he's somewhere very quiet inside all of this, and the noise of the crowd and the heat of the room exist in a different universe from wherever he is standing. She throws again, more, different. Nothing lands, and the crowd came for something specific. They arranged their Friday nights around this. They drove here. They've been building toward this moment for 6 days, since the video, since the comment sections filled, and the anticipation became a pressure they needed to release. And what they are watching is a woman throwing everything she has at a man who will not hit back. At first, they're with her, reacting to each combination, holding when an exchange gets close. Then it goes on, and do something, from near the back. Male voice, not cruel exactly, just entitled to whatever he came for. Stop dancing around her. You think you're better than this? She hears it, and the crowd turning not against her, but at him, and for making a spectacle of not engaging, and for standing there absorbing everything, and giving nothing back and making the whole room feel somehow like they've been invited to watch a statement being made at their expense. And the voices from the back go into her like fuel, and she stops performing. She was performing, she can admit that now, mid-fight, with sweat in her eyes and her lungs finding their rhythm. The showmanship, the crowd management, the composed exterior working for the phones, but the crowd turned, and the fuel hit something underneath the performance, and what's underneath is not composed. What's underneath is raw and afraid, and furious and tired. Tired of Greg's calls, tired of watching her own decline in her own footage, and tired of this quiet man being more compelling to 50 million people than 15 years of her actual work, and tired of the fact that she chose him because she thought he was the safest possible target. And he has turned out to be the opposite of safe, in a way she should have known, should have seen, should have read in the hallway on Thursday night and walked away from. And she stops fighting to win the room. She starts fighting to hurt him, and the change is subtle, a degree of commitment that wasn't there before. She's working inside now, shortening the distance he's been living in, taking away the margin, faint low, close distance, elbow. And it comes from an angle she's never thrown in any class she's taught, because it doesn't belong in a class. It comes from a place past a line she told herself she wouldn't cross tonight, but she crossed it without a decision. And the way she's been crossing lines all week, and the way she always crosses lines not with intention but with momentum, and with the accumulated velocity of fear she hasn't named, and it catches him across the left brow, the skin opens, blood fast and immediate the way head wounds are, and it runs into his left eye before he can blink, and then the world on that side goes red, and then blurred, and then something in the quality of the overhead light, or in the salt that hits his lip, or in the specific frequency of the crowd's sound, when they see blood, something opens, and not a memory, not an image, and a state. The one he spent 14 months keeping behind a door, he built out of routine and discipline, and a promise he made to a woman who reached for his hand when her own hands had almost nothing left in them. The door opens, 3 seconds, maybe 4. He is not in Atlanta, and he is not in Ironclad Fight Academy on a Friday night with 50 phones and 50 people watching. He is in the flat and specific place that has no geography, no time, only what is directly in front of him and what needs to happen next, and his hand closes around Brooke's wrist. Not a technique from any class, a knowledge that is old and precise and belongs to a version of him that he has spent 14 months trying to contain. It folds her arm at the joint, shifts her weight forward, and leaves her standing on nothing, and her balance gone, and her options gone, and every year of training, and every trophy, and every belt, and every hour she has poured into this building, and this career meaning nothing, and precisely nothing. In front of whatever is looking at her right now, she looks up at him, 6 inches between them, less. The eyes she is looking into have nothing in them of sport, nothing of competition, and nothing of whatever she imagined she was challenging when she said the words 6 days ago on a Tuesday night with 22 people watching. And what is in those eyes is flat and far and still. And she has been in this business for 15 years, and she has trained with people who were genuinely dangerous, and she has never once looked into anything like this. And every trophy, every hour, every piece of herself she has poured into this place. None of it is a language this thing speaks. Somebody near the front makes a sound. Then Dad, 1 word. From the edge of the mat, high, fractured. And the voice of a 19-year-old who is looking at her father and seeing something she has never seen before and needs it to stop. He hears her, through the flat and far place, through the state with no name, and through the years-old quiet of whatever he became in the army, and brought home and has been carrying in a locked box ever since. He hears his daughter, and he comes back, not all at once, not like a switch, and more like surfacing the way a person comes up from deep water, and not instantly dry and warm and oriented, but moving in the right direction, and moving toward air. And his hand opens, finger by finger, Brooke's wrist releases, he steps back, and 1 step, 2, 3, and until there is open mat between them and his chest is heaving, and his hands he holds them out from his body, and both of them, open, and looks at them, and shaking slightly. Blood from his left brow running down the side of his face in a thin line, dropping from his jaw to the rubber floor below. He looks at his hands. He looks at them the way you look at something you're not entirely sure belongs to you, and the way you look at a thing that did something without asking you first, and you are taking its inventory now, and counting the fingers, and making sure they are all still present and accounted for, and still finally, and the room is so quiet that the HK in the ceiling fills all of it. 50 people and their phones and not one sound. Brooke stands where he left her, her wrist pulled to her chest not because he heard it, and because the body gathers itself back after a specific kind of alarm, pulls its parts inward, accounts for them. She stares at him. He extends his hand to her. Not a fist, not a performance, just a hand. Open, come up. She looks at it. The whole room looks at it, and 30 phones hold the frame. And Brooke Sinclair looks at the open hand extended to her by the man she put on a video and made the internet laugh at. The man she pushed a 19-year-old girl in front of so a class could laugh at her too. And the man she has spent 6 days treating as the safest available surface for things she didn't want to examine in herself. And she looks at it for a long moment, and she turns away. She walks to the side door, the one to the back exit. She pushes it open and she steps through, and the door swings shut behind her with a sound like a single period at the end of a sentence, and nobody follows her. And nobody goes after her to film it. Nobody chases the next moment into the parking lot. And the room stays exactly where it is, and caught in the gravity of what just happened here, and looking at the door, and then looking back at the man in the center of the cleared floor, with his hand still extended and his blood still falling, and he lowers his hand. He stands there a moment. Then he turns and walks to the wall where his mop is leaning. He picks it up. He goes back to the strip of floor by the side exit, the strip he hadn't finished when Garrett handed him the waiver 2 hours ago. He mops, and his own blood now, in the water. Garrett watches from the edge of the room, clipboard still in hand. He doesn't move, doesn't say anything, and he just stands with the look of a man who came in expecting one kind of story and has been handed something he doesn't yet have the right words for. Sadie is at the edge of the mat. She is not crying. She is not smiling. And she is doing the thing she does, the filing thing, the watching and recording and carefully storing, But there is something around her eyes that is not quite relief because it arrived wearing the face of something else, the way the biggest feelings always seem to show up in borrowed clothes. And her father is mopping the floor. He is still here. He chose here. Near the back exit, one has been recording the whole time. Its owner doesn't know yet what he has, and won't know for another 2 hours, when he posts it without a caption and goes to bed, and wakes up in the morning to find the world found it while he was sleeping. But that's later, and right now there is only the gym, and in the 50 people who came expecting a fight and got something they don't have a name for, and the sound of a mop on rubber, and the man in gray coveralls with blood drying on the side of his face, and moving through the last strip of floor by the side door, and left to right, overlapping. Like the most important thing in the room is the floor, like the floor is clean, like that is enough. The fist becomes a hand, that's the thing. And that's the specific, quiet, devastating thing that the internet finds at 2 in the morning and shares until the sun comes up. Not the control, not the grip around her wrist, and not the flat look in his eyes when he was somewhere else entirely. And Brooke Sinclair understood, in the space of one breath, that she had stepped into something she had not been trained to step out of. And not any of that. What they share, what they slow down and watch twice and watch a third time, is the hand held out to her. Open after everything, and after her elbow across his brow and the blood on his face, and the 3 seconds where the thing he carries came up out of its box and stood in the room with all of them. After all of it, the hand, palm up, come up, and then the man picking up the mop and moving back to the strip of floor he hadn't finished, the blood still on his face, the crowd watching him not watch them back. Someone captions it. Not a large account, not anyone verified, just a person who watched the clip 4 times and needed to put words to the feeling, and he had every reason, he had every ability, he chose neither. That sentence goes further than the video. It gets attached to other things, photographs of other moments, other people in other situations where the same quiet choice was made and nobody noticed at the time, and it escapes the clip entirely and becomes something that lives on its own, and that coaches use in team meetings, and that a woman in Ohio texts to her brother without explanation, and he sends back a single period, and which is apparently the right response. And Duran doesn't see any of this until Saturday afternoon. Sadie shows him, and she stayed after Friday, didn't go back to campus, and just got in his truck when he locked up and rode home without a word. And he made eggs in the morning, and she ate them. And they sat at the table in the quiet that they share, and the comfortable kind, and the kind that doesn't need to be filled. And she puts her phone in front of him at the table. He reads it. The number at the bottom of the video. The caption. A few of the comments because Sadie has already scrolled and he's still holding the phone. He sets it down. Okay, he says. Sadie stares at him. That's it? Okay, and what do you want me to say? She looks at him for a long moment. Then, despite everything, despite the weight of the last 18 hours pressing on both of them from different directions, she laughs, and short and real. Fine, okay. She takes her phone back. He finishes his coffee. And outside the kitchen window, the Saturday morning is doing what October mornings do in Atlanta when they're good, cool, and clear. The light coming in at a low angle that makes everything look like it's been reconsidered overnight. He washes the dishes, and she falls asleep on the couch with her biology textbook open on her chest. He covers her with the blanket from the back cushions and stands there a moment, looking at his daughter asleep, and then he goes to get ready for work. And Garrett Holt is already at the gym when Duran arrives. This is unusual. Garrett doesn't come in on Saturday mornings unless something requires it, and he's standing in the equipment room doorway when Duran gets there, hands in his pockets, looking at the floor with the expression of a man who has been rehearsing something and is now deciding whether to say it. Duran sets down his bag. Nobody got hurt, Garrett says. Duran waits, and you both signed the waiver. It held, and he shifts his weight. And as of this morning, I have 4 parents who want to enroll their kids in classes because of a video of you not fighting somebody. A pause. My phone has been going since 9. A journalist from the Journal-Constitution, and a man from Memphis who wants to drive down just to meet you. He looks up. I told the journalist no. Told the Memphis man thank you. No. The parents I'm going to talk to Brooke about, since those would be her classes. And Duran nods. Garrett is quiet for a moment. He didn't come in on a Saturday morning to deliver a status report, and they both know it. Your position doesn't change, Garrett says, and Sadie's belt test is still on for next Saturday. I know, Duran says. Thank you. And Garrett looks at him. He has the specific look of a man who has more to say and is deciding how much of it belongs in the light. I've run this place 18 years, he says finally, and I've had real fighters in here. Men who could walk into any room in this country and be the most dangerous person in it. He looks at his own hands for a moment, which is not something he does. I've never once seen somebody stop the way you stopped last night. And Duran doesn't say anything. How? Garrett asks. Not testing, not challenging. Just a man who watched something he doesn't have the architecture to understand and wants to. And I heard Sadie, Duran says. Garrett takes that in. That's always been all. Garrett nods once. And he stands there another moment, and something in his face that has been tight since Tuesday evening, since the video and the phone calls and the waiver on the desk, something in it eases, not completely, but enough to see. He goes back to the office, and Duran goes to the equipment room and starts the work he came to do. And Sunday is quiet. He goes to church in the morning. The small one on Piedmont that he started attending 8 months ago, not for doctrine exactly, but for the hour of stillness. The being in a room with other people, all engaged in the same hard, quiet work of trying to be decent. And he sits in the back. He doesn't talk to anyone after. He drives home. He calls his mother in Savannah. 20 minutes, nothing urgent. And she has seen the video his sister showed her. And she doesn't ask about it directly. But she asks about Sadie 3 times. Which is how she asks about everything. And she's good, he tells her. Really good. She gets that from Carla, his mother says. She gets some things from Carla, he says. His mother is quiet a moment. Then, and some things from you. He doesn't answer that. But he holds it. He makes dinner. And Sadie comes back from campus. And drops her bag. And eats half his food. And falls asleep on the couch at 9:30 with a highlighter in her hand. And he takes the highlighter out of her hand. And covers her with the blanket. Stands at the shelf by the window for a moment. The photograph. Woman mid-law. The context gone. Just the joy itself, caught in a fraction of a second that outlasted everything around it. He looks at her for a while in the quiet apartment, and then he goes to bed. Brooke doesn't come back to the gym until Tuesday. She missed Saturday's morning class. sent a text to the substitute with no explanation. And on Monday, she ran the evening session, but arrived at the last possible minute and left immediately after. And if anyone tried to speak to her about Friday, she moved away with such clean, practiced efficiency that they stopped trying. And Tuesday afternoon, she teaches back-to-back. She is technically excellent, fully present in her corrections, not performing the competence actually there. But something is different. Her students feel it without naming it. And when someone misses a technique, she doesn't reach for the edge in her voice. She doesn't let the space between the correction and the response become an opportunity. She just corrects it. Like that is the whole job. Like it is enough. Because it is enough. And she goes home Tuesday night, and she does not open the laptop, does not run the fight tapes. She makes a real dinner and eats it at the table, and sits for a while after, without moving or looking at her phone, which turns out to be the hardest thing she's done all week. And she thinks about what Aldred asked her. She's been thinking about it since Thursday, has been carrying it around like a stone in a jacket pocket, always there, always the same weight, whether she reaches for it or not. And what are you actually afraid of? There was a coach, when she was 21, and she came up under him at a club in the city she grew up in, and he was the first person who made her feel like she could be genuinely good at this, and then she wanted his approval with the particular intensity of a young woman who has decided that one person's opinion is the measure of everything. And one afternoon he watched her spar, and then he said, and in front of the whole floor, and not unkindly, and the way someone says a fact, and she's really only cut out to teach cardio to housewives. And everyone heard it. She built 15 years on making that sentence untrue, and then somewhere in those 15 years she absorbed or taught herself, or learned through the atmosphere of competition, where the air always tastes a little like threat, that the fastest way to stay above the line was to keep other people just below it. Not cruelly, and just as a maintenance, a calibration. A way of ensuring the gap stayed exactly where she needed it. She grabbed the nearest thing, and a man with a mop who never fought back. A 19-year-old who froze when the room turned. She sits at her table and looks at the wall of her apartment. Awards, framed photographs from fights she won, and a regional semifinal where her hand is raised and her expression is fierce, and she was genuinely excellent that day, genuinely at the top of what she could do. She was good. She is still good, but good, she is beginning to understand, is not the same thing as right. And she has spent 15 years acting as if they were the same thing because the distinction was inconvenient. It is Wednesday afternoon. She finds Sadie in the hallway after the evening session, and Sadie is coming out of the locker room with her bag over one shoulder, already somewhere else in her head, already back at whatever she left when she came to train. Brooke steps into the hall. "Can I have a minute?" Sadie stops, looks at her, and not guarded, not warm. Present, in the way of someone who processes before they react. "Sure," she says. Brooke doesn't ask to go somewhere private. The hallway is empty enough. She stands there a moment, and for once she doesn't have a structure for this. And she always has a structure. She always knows how to begin, how to manage the shape of a conversation, how to control what gets said and when and how it lands. She doesn't have any of that right now, and so she just says the thing. "What I did to you," she says, 3 weeks ago. Calling you out in front of the class like that, setting you up in front of 30 people knowing you'd freeze. Sadie waits. "That was the worst thing I've done in this building." Brooke holds her eyes and doesn't look away. "You didn't deserve any part of it, and you were just there, and I used that. And I knew I was using it, and I told myself a story about why it was justified, and it wasn't." She stops, starts again. "I'm sorry. Not because the video made it visible, because it was wrong." The hallway Haiti is quiet for a moment. "Can I say something?" she asks. "Yes, my dad told me before Friday that there was something in him he couldn't always control, and he was scared of what it might do." She shifts her bag on her shoulder. "He told me that, and then he stood up on that mat anyway, because not standing up meant something to me he didn't want it to mean," and her voice stays even. "He was scared, and he didn't handle it by making me smaller." She says it without heat. Without the performance of judgment, just the fact of it, placed between them. Brooke doesn't have anything to put on the other side. "Thank you for hearing me," she says, and Sadie nods, adjusts her bag, goes to find her father. Brooke stands in the hallway for a moment after she's gone. Then she goes to find Coach Aldred. and she calls him this time. He picks up on the second ring. They meet at the gym the next morning, early before anyone else is in. He sits on the bench along the far wall, the same bench, the same position as Thursday. Like he knew she'd come back to this spot. Maybe he did, and Brooke sits beside him. She doesn't say anything for a moment. "You ask me what I was afraid of," she says. He nods. "I'm afraid of becoming someone people used to know." And she says it plainly. No performance in it. Just the fact, finally in the air between them. The career is over. The sponsors are gone. If I'm not the best person in this building, if I'm not above the line, then I'm just someone who teaches kickboxing to adults on Tuesday nights. And she looks at the mat. I've been terrified of that for so long I stopped being able to see anything else. Aldred is quiet. And the gym is early morning quiet, the particular kind where the equipment absorbs sound, and the air still has the chill of the night in it. "You know what outlasts the trophies," he says finally. "She waits. The people you taught. The way they move, and the way they understand something about themselves they didn't understand before they walked in here." He looks at Sid too. "That's yours, all of it, and every person you've corrected, and every technique that clicked because you explained it right, that goes out the door with them, and it never comes back to you, and you never get credited for it. But it's the most permanent thing you'll ever make." And she looks at her hands. "I let them laugh at a 19-year-old girl," she says. "Yes," he says. "You did. No softening. No yes, but just yes. So start there," he says. Not with a speech, not with a gesture for the cameras. And one thing at a time with the people you actually hurt. She already has. She told him that. He nods when she does. "Good," he says. "Keep going." He stands. And he's leaving again. And the way he always leaves, when the thing is said. And not before. And not after. "And Brooke," he says at the door. She looks up. "You're a good coach. You have been for a long time. You didn't need any of the other thing." He pauses. "You just didn't know that yet." He goes. She sits on the bench in the empty gym for a while, and then she gets up and goes to teach her morning class. And she is good at it. And she knows she is good at it. And then for the first time in a long time, that is enough on its own. And she finds Darren on Thursday evening. He's in the equipment room, organizing the jump ropes, the kind of task that benefits from patience and doesn't get done right unless someone decides to do it right. He looks up when she comes in. He doesn't seem surprised. He doesn't seem much of anything in particular, in the way he usually doesn't. She stops in the doorway. "I talked to Sadie," she says. "I know. She told me." She leans against the doorframe. "And she came in here with something organized, not a speech, and she doesn't do speeches, but a structure and a sequence. And the version of this that the composed, controlled Brooke Sinclair would deliver. But she's tired of that version this week. She's been tired of it for a while, probably. She's just been too busy maintaining it to notice." She says the thing she came to say. "How did you stop?" And he sets the rope he's holding on the hook. "And I told Garrett too," she says. "You were gone. I've been in real fights, not just," she gestures at the space between them. "I know what it looks like when the part of a person that makes decisions leaves. You were there. I saw it." She doesn't look away. "And then you weren't. And you came back for a moment." "I heard Sadie," he says. She waits. Nothing more comes. Just her voice, she says. And yes, that's all it took. It's all it's ever taken. He is quiet a beat. You need something worth coming back for. Someone who changes the math of the moment. For me, it's always been her. Brooke thinks about this. Genuinely, for a moment, thinks about it. "I don't have that," she says. Not as a complaint, as information. As a fact she is handing him without expecting him to fix it. "I've been doing this for 15 years and I've never stopped because of another person. And I've always just kept going because stopping felt like losing. That sounds exhausting," he says. She laughs, short and involuntary, surprised out of her. "It is," she says. "It genuinely is." And the equipment room smells of rubber and chalk and the honest staleness of a space where people work hard. Everything in it is worn. The jump ropes, the resistance bands, the cracked foam roller in the corner, all of it has been used by someone trying to get better at something. And the effort shows in the material. It's not ugly. It's just true. "You're a good coach," Darren says. He says it the way he says most things. Without ornament, just the assessment. "I've watched enough classes from the back of the room to know it. You're the real thing." And she looks at him. "You watched my classes. I was mopping. I pay attention." She is quiet a moment. Something shifts slightly in her expression, not softening exactly, and more like the specific relaxation of a thing that has been held rigid for a long time and is finally allowed to settle. "I know what I can do," she says. "That's not what I've been protecting." She finds the right way to say it. "And I've been protecting the idea that what I can do is enough to make sure nobody ever says that thing again. The thing a coach said to me when I was 21, in front of everyone." And she pauses. "He said I was only cut out to teach cardio to housewives." Duran is still. "I built 15 years on proving him wrong," she says. "And the problem with building on that is you never stop, because there's always another version of that moment coming, and always another room where you could end up small. So you make sure other people are smaller first." He holds her gaze and doesn't look away. "What happens now?" he asks, and she thinks about it. "Genuinely, I teach," she says. "Actually teach. Without the other thing, a pause. See what that feels like when it's not in service of proving something." He nods. She pushes off the door frame. "Your daughter," she says. "She's good, and not finished yet, but the foundation is real. Whatever you've been telling her, keep telling her." She goes. He stands in the equipment room for a moment. Then he picks up the next rope and continues. And Saturday morning, the belt test. Garrett arranged the folding chairs 3 days in advance, a row along each wall, and by 9 the room is filling with the particular energy that gyms carry when the purpose is celebration rather than competition, and parents with phones angled differently. Younger siblings sitting in the folding chairs and swinging their legs. The low murmur of people who came to watch someone they love do something hard. And there are also 11 people Duran doesn't recognize as parents of any student testing today. And people who came because of a video, because they wanted to see this specific room with their own eyes. And they sit in the chairs quietly and they wait, and they don't cause any trouble. And they are just people who saw something that mattered to them and wanted to be in the place where it happened. He understands that. Brooke sits at the judge's table. She earned the seat honestly, and the credentials, the experience, the eye. She sits with a clipboard and a pen, and she watches each student with a quality of attention that her regular students notice and will talk about later, and not more exacting than usual. Something else. She is actually hoping they get it right. She is invested in each one individually, in this specific person in front of her, in this particular moment of what they're trying to become. Students move through the test in order, and some stumble. Some exceed what their instructors anticipated. Brooke writes on her clipboard, does not react visibly in either direction until the score is announced, and when she marks a student well, she does it because they earned it, and when she marks them short, she does it for the same reason, and there is no performance in either direction. And this is what she always should have been doing. It's not new information. She's known how to do this the whole time. She just stopped letting it be enough. Sadie is near the end of the list. When her name is called, Darren stops moving, and he's been in the back corner since 8:30 the cleaning is done. He finished early. He stayed because Garrett said, "Come if you want," and he wanted. He's holding a broom that he stopped actually using 20 minutes ago, and his hands needed something. Sadie walks to the center of the mat. She sets her feet. For a moment, just one, he sees the Sadie from 3 weeks ago. The tension across her shoulders. The slight overcorrection in her stance, the invisible weight of a room watching, and he knows that feeling. He spent 14 months learning its topography. And then she finds her feet. The form comes out of her clean, and the cross, the one that snapped the air that night in the empty gym, and made her look at her own fist in surprise lands at the right point in the sequence, and weight transferred through the floor. Hip turned early enough. The sound of it is small in the large room, but Duran hears it the way he heard it the first time, in the half-dark with the air handler running, and the two of them laughing about a punch. She finishes, and breathing controlled, stance held through the final position. She doesn't look at the judge's table. She looks at the back of the room, and past the rows of folding chairs, past the parents and their phones, past the 11 strangers who came because they saw something online and needed to be in the room where it happened. And she finds him. He finds her. For a moment the room is not there, and not the test, and not chairs, and not Garrett at the edge of the floor, and not Brooke with her pen, and just a father and a daughter in a gym where something important happened, and something important was kept, and they are looking at each other across all of it. Then Brooke stands up. She doesn't say anything. She does explain the gesture, or introduce it, or make a speech of it. She simply rises from her chair at the judge's table, and she turns toward the back of the room, toward the man with the broom and the gray coveralls who has been standing against the back wall since before the test started. And she bows, a full bow, head down, deliberate, and held for a beat longer than any ceremony requires. The room sees it, and the phones that were aimed at the students all shift and all tilt toward the same point in the back corner, and all catch the same thing, and a black belt, and at the judge's table, and bowing to the man with the broom. And Duran inclines his head. The broom is still in his hand. It lasts 2 seconds. Brooke sits back down, picks up her pen, writes the score. Garrett announces it. And Sadie's name is called with the others, and she receives it without fuss, without drama, with just the small private expression of someone who knows exactly what they earned and what it cost to earn it. And people are starting to gather their things and folding the programs someone printed and finding their jackets, and the particular organized dispersal of a crowd that has seen what it came to see. And when Garrett finds Duran at the equipment room door, and you have a minute, they go to the office. Garrett sits behind the desk, nothing on it this time. No files, no printouts, no papers to look at instead of the person across from him. Just 2 men in a room on a Saturday morning. And I want to offer you a position on the staff, Garrett says. Duran is quiet, not cleaning, not equipment, instruction. He folds his hands on the desk. And I don't mean pad work or sparring or anything that puts you in the center of the floor with gloves. And that's not what I'm talking about. He looks at Duran steadily. The young people who come through here, a lot of them don't have what they actually need. They get the technique. They learn the combinations. But the other thing, the discipline, the steadiness, the ability to take a hit without losing themselves, that's not on any schedule. Nobody's been teaching it because nobody here has it to give in the way it needs to be given. And a pause. You do. Duran looks at the desk. What would it look like, he asks. Honestly, Garrett exhales. I don't completely know yet. Small groups, maybe one-on-ones, something between a class and a conversation. We build it together. He meets his eye. But I think you should be in this building as more than the man with the mop. Duran thinks about it. He thinks about the equipment room, the jump ropes on the hooks, the locker that was sticking for 3 weeks before he fixed it. And he thinks about the root mats, mirrors, and locker room, and windows, and the way his body knows it now, the way it knows his own breathing. And he thinks about 11 o'clock at night when the building is empty, and the bags have settled, and the only light is the flickering one above the supply closet. He thinks about Carla, and he thinks about a promise made in a room that smelled of antiseptic, to a woman who reached for his hand when her own hands had almost nothing left in them, and she only, as you know, He looked at his daughter this morning, across a room full of people and folding chairs, and she found him in 3 seconds, because she knew where to look, and because she has always known where he is, even when he was trying to be invisible, even when invisible was the whole point. She found him anyway. She always finds him. I'll take the position, he says. Garrett nods. I'd like to keep the evening shift too, Duran says. And Garrett doesn't ask why. He already knows why. Some people, when they find the place that holds them, don't let go of any part of it, even the part that looks like less, because it isn't less, and because the evening shift is the quiet. And the quiet is where a man can know himself without noise, and knowing himself without noise is how he stays the person who can do everything else. Done, Garrett says. They shake hands, and Duran goes back out to where the chairs are being folded, and the room is resuming its ordinary dimensions. And Sadie is talking to another student near the mat with the specific animation of someone telling a story they're pleased with. And she sees him and raises an eyebrow. He nods once. She understands immediately because she always does, and she goes back to her conversation. Saturday night, 11 o'clock, Ironclad Fight Academy after everyone has gone. The folding chairs are stacked against the back wall, and the mat wiped down, the equipment room closed, the front desk dark, and in the parking lot outside the long windows, and only his truck and the yellow light on its pole, and that old receipt on the asphalt that has been there for 3 weeks, and will probably be there 3 weeks from now. And some things stay. Duran moves through the building on a route he never varies. Mats first, the long arc of the mop left to right overlapping, and then the mirrors. And his own reflection moving with him in the half-light. and gray coveralls, and steady hands. And he doesn't look at the reflection long. He knows where he is. He doesn't need the mirror to tell him. Locker room, equipment room, the supply closet where the light flickers once. Just once, never twice. And then the long strip of floor by the front windows, and where the day leaves its marks, the scuffs and streaks, and evidence of the 50 people who came in the morning and came back again in the evening, and brought their effort and their hope and their ordinary lives into this building, and left the floor looking like they'd been here, and he cleans it. He is most of the way through the last section when he passes the back corner. Sadie is asleep on the folded mat. She came back after dinner, said campus was loud on Saturday nights and she wanted the quiet. And she lasted until around 9:30, which is when the biology textbook slipped sideways on her lap and the highlighter rolled off the page, and she went somewhere that required no fluorescent lights and no membrane transport diagrams. And she is 19 years old. And she has her mother's chin and her mother's stubbornness, and lately, and increasingly, and her mother's way of being exactly where she said she'd be, and also exactly where she was needed, and which Daron is only now understanding are the same thing. And he picks up the highlighter from the floor, sets it on top of the textbook, looks at his daughters asleep in the corner of the gym where he works, in the building where something happened this week that he will carry differently than anything else he carries, and he puts his hand on her head, gently, open-palmed, the way you touch something you're grateful for, and the way you touch something you came close to letting the wrong part of yourself decide, and didn't. And the not deciding was the whole thing, and was the entire point, and was the promise kept in the only way it could be kept, not by being a different kind of man, but by being this exact man and choosing, and in the moment when it was hardest, to stay. And she doesn't wake up. He takes his hand back. He picks up the mop. He finishes the windows. Outside the parking lot is still. The yellow light makes its circle on the asphalt. The old receipt shifts slightly in a wind that doesn't quite reach through the glass, and inside the air handler, on its single note, the bag settled and still, the fluorescent above the supply closet, doing what it always does. One flicker, just one. Daron wrings the mop out over the bucket, and the water comes out gray, clean gray, the color of a night's honest work. He sets the mop against the wall, and he turns the lights off, and one bank at a time, and until only the windows remain, and lit from outside by the yellow pole light. And the room holds all its shapes in the dark, the bags, and the mirrors, and the judge's table, and the folded chairs, and the mat where his daughter is sleeping, and all the things that happened here this week, and the week before, and the 14 months before that. And he sits on the edge of the main mat. Not because anything is wrong, just because sometimes a man needs to sit in the dark in the place where he does his work and be still without asking the stillness to be anything other than what it is. He has a promise. He kept it. And not because he was never tempted to break it, not because the thing in him that the promise was meant to contain ever went away or diminished or decided to leave him alone, but because in the moment that mattered most, in the 3 or 4 seconds when the door opened and the flat and far place came up into the room with him, he heard his daughter's voice. And he came back. He will always come back. And as long as she is there to come back to, he will always find his way back. He sits in the dark gym for a while, then he stands, and then he goes and crouches beside Sadie and says her name quietly, and she makes the sound she's been making since she was small, the specific low sound of someone returning from a long way down, and she opens her eyes. And time to go, he says. She sits up, finds the textbook, finds the highlighter, looks around the dark gym with the blinking expression of someone reassembling where they are. Did I fall asleep? An hour ago. Why didn't you wake me up? I did. She considers this, decides not to argue. She stands and gathers her bag, and then they walk out through the side door together into the October night, and he locks it behind them, and the gym is dark and still and exactly as it should be, and in the parking lot the yellow light makes its circle. His truck, her bag over her shoulder. The receipt on this asphalt moved another inch by the wind. He opens the truck. She gets in. He gets in, and he starts it. And then the engine turns over the way it always does, and the heater comes on, and then they pull out of the lot and onto the street, and Atlanta opens up around them, the lights, and the quiet streets, and the October air and the ordinary Saturday night of a city that doesn't know or care what happened today in a small gym on a block that is still deciding what it wants to become. And he drives. She has the textbook open on her knees in the dark of the truck cab, which is not a useful way to read but is her way of being ready to read, which is different. Neither of them says anything for a while, and then Sadie says, and not looking up from the page she can't actually see, and you're going to be good at it. And, you know, and the instruction thing. He keeps his eyes on the road. Garrett told you, he says, and Garrett didn't have to tell me. She turns a page. I've been watching you teach for 14 months. He drives. She reads the page she cannot see. The city moves past the windows. The strongest man in any room is the one who cannot be knocked down. And it's the one who knows what will knock him down. And it knows what brings him back, and has made his peace with both of those things, and shows up anyway, and keeps showing up, and opens his hands. And every time he opens his hands,